Solara Rose, welcome to the show.
Aw, I'm so grateful to be here with you.
Mm. Yeah, so grateful to be here with you as well. Perfect timing for us to finally land in this now moment to have this conversation. And yeah, a lot to unpack. And this as we both know and as you alluded to, this is gonna be a big conversation, and there's no specific one linear topic that I have in mind, but there are themes, patterns, cycles, seasons all wrapped up into what I just describe as an emerging phenomenon that is happening in the human experience on planet Earth, in our minds, our bodies, our souls, our nervous systems, our psyches. And there are very clear, even though I don't have a clear language for it all the time, there's a very distinct set of patterns that seem to be taking place within myself, within you, within our relationship dynamics, within our community of close friends and soul allies and clients and colleagues, and also just witnessing what is taking place on the world stage in different iterations of that, whether it's socio-political and just like the wild story arc that is. And I don't have any intention of getting into the details of that, but just as a reference, just as an example, because it is mainstay in a lot of people's minds because it's on the television screen of consciousness. It's a main theme that's happening, and a momentum that's happening on the world stage that influences and affects all of us, and we're part of a bigger dynamic, a bigger story arc that is happening um, in the human drama, the human story, however you want to call it. And so
Mhm.
I think where I want to lead in with you first is what I'm sensing in simple terms is that there's something that has been and is emerging within all of us that doesn't have a set language pattern. It doesn't have a set template or paradigm that we can lock into or that we're fully familiar with based on the paradigms of what it is to be a human, whether that's in relationship and intimacy and sacred union and marriage and being a parent, having children, like this linear path of you go through life in kind of a set sequence of patterns, and then you become an adult, and you choose your vocation, and you settle down, you get married, you have children. People are doing that. That's obviously part of a pattern, but it does appear to me that there are more options that are being created on the menu board of what's available to experience as a human or to experience on one's life path. There's so many different things that are opening up.
Yeah.
Um, some positive, some perceived as negative or challenging. And I guess with all of that, suffice to say, there is an evolutionary impulse or process that is happening, whether we're ready or not, whether we're aware of it or not, whether we have a full grasp of what that is or not. I think all of us feel it on some or many levels. And it appears to me that the fundamental thing, at least for me, that I keep finding is that the only way to go through this process is to learn how to yield to it.
Mhm.
Another word you might use is surrender. I think yield feels a little more accurate.
Yeah.
In letting go of control, letting go of knowing or not knowing, but like thinking I know is
Mhm.
better.
Yeah.
Thinking I know
Totally.
what it is based
Yeah.
on my prior experiences, based on former generations of experiences of what it has been to be a human. We're in a day and age where we're living through something that's never ever happened before, and I think I'll pause on that.
Yeah. Well, I'm stoked about it. And it is certainly a sensation of enthrallment, anxiety, love, fear, tumultuousness, intimacy, like all of these, this whole spectrum of felt sensation can be arising in this time. And really the greater arc of the pattern is that we're dismantling as a humanity centuries of constructs and rules and bounds and limitations and these very kind of cookie cutter ways of unfolding our life story. And we're seeing really the light of pure consciousness beginning to emerge. And as it emerges, it's burning up the old, it's alchemizing, transmuting, transforming. A lot of beings are likely experiencing identity crises on some level. Who am I? What am I? What is this trajectory? It all feels so unknown. And really, the deepest unearthing that's taking place is all of those layers are lifting off so that we can, the yielding and the allowance and the surrender serves us to ultimately merge into oneness with
Mm,
our supreme true nature, the story that has already been writ, and the knowingness that is abiding, permanent, eternal, the one thing of permanency that we have in this life to hold on to amidst radical accelerated change and transformation. And what's really being so all of these old paradigms are beginning to lift off, and in that there's a deep alchemical process that's unfolding in human consciousness and embodiment. And what does this mean for how okay, so now once all these layers are lifted off and I'm fully embodied in the unitive radiance of my true nature and being as pure, limitless love, how do I emerge from that space? And really, what we're establishing is a greater collective synchrony, the symphony of life, and how we live that in an interconnected way where we're not limited to
mm,
the I'm going to go to college, I'm going to
mm-hmm,
have a husband and get married and have children, and then we're going to grow old, and then our retirement is going to be what, it's not that storyline anymore. It's we're going to have a family, and we're going to all serve and support one another, and we're going to have these interconnected communities of deep care and intimacy and love, and there's a tribal essence to it that's actually really rooted and grounded into oneness. And then there's also all these other configurations that are available to us, people who don't wish to have children at all and who are making their legacy and their service in the world that which they steward and mother and father and nourish into
mm,
being. And all of these things are gorgeous and acceptable because what we're realizing that we are emerging as a nature emerges, right? So the flower, the honeybee, the whale, they're not thinking about what is my life purpose? Who am I going to mate with and have
mm,
children
mm-hmm,
with?
mm-hmm,
How do I achieve my ultimate potential in this life? It's they're allowing the
mm-hmm.
organic emergence of their divine blueprint. And in that, everything organically synchronizes. We as humans have this spectacular technology of the human mind and the human brain that can either be our greatest ally or our greatest inhibitor that limits us profoundly. And so the aspects of the mind that are operating in fear, judgment, resistance, attachment, a pulse to separate, which is actually not even possible. That's all fear-based. And all of that is what we are alchemizing, burning up. And it's all forming a greater intimacy, unification, and allowance of one another's uniqueness, and learning how to operate in tandem
Mm,
from that space of pure, deep love.
mm,
And we haven't seen it before because we as a species haven't really made that fully, not everybody, but many haven't made that correlation of, wow, these are all the constructs that I've created by my mind that I have to live by. Like, how many people pay people tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars to learn their life purpose? And it's like, well, it's to be your fullest, truest emanation of loving brilliance in this world. And the form and shape that that takes in any moment is ever changing. And we're learning to be like nature.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah, in the ever-changing dynamics that are happening in our own lived experience, our perceived experience, our external experience, and our circumstances, in the way that we are orienting to things. And this may feel resonant to some, may not feel fully resonant or fully understandable to others that may be not experiencing such rapid change in dynamics, whether internal and external. But so many of us are, and especially those of us who I would say are a little bit more on like a leading edge of consciousness. And all that really means is that we're constantly testing and pushing the boundaries of our capabilities, of our awareness, of our healing and our growth. Like we're really committed and deeply invested in the excavation of our trauma, the excavation of our wounding, the excavation and liberation of blocks, barriers, and disconnecting patterns that we have either adopted, taken on, or were imposed upon us without our conscious consent by our caretakers, by our epigenetics. Of our parental figures or just the ancestors or however all that really works. Like one thing is very clear is that it's like the phrase the sins of the father get passed down to the son. So like the until the parent or the parent to be clears their karma, clears their addictions, clears their patterns and their cyclical kind of, karma, I think is the best word. It does trickle down onto the child and becomes the child's responsibility to
Oh,
then resolve those old energetics. And I think a lot of us have come into this world with that burden to bear and we're fully capable of doing it and we have the awareness in most cases of like yeah I get the bigger picture. I get the phenomenon. I get kind of that this has been playing out for eons at depth, and this has been playing out epigenetically in my bloodline and my my parents and their patterns and their wounding, and they did the best they can supposedly, like all those phrases that we understand as perspectives, but then the actual lived experience of actually bearing the burden of things that are not necessarily ours or don't appear to be ours, the weight of the world,
yeah.
um, that's a real thing,
Mm,
and it's something that I think a lot of us are trying to navigate with the frameworks or the models or the perspectives that we have available to us. And so what I'm realizing is that at the next level of my development, of my wholeness, of my transcendence of old patterns, it's requiring a different approach. It's requiring a different approach than white knuckling it or just willing myself through hard situations. Like I can do that. I'm capable of doing that. But I realize that that also kind of creates an interesting dynamic where I'm now setting myself up to always be the person that can will himself through hard times.
mm,
And that becomes its own repeating cycle and its own like trauma response pattern. So then there's like there's a new approach, there's a new way, and all I sense is that it it just requires a certain level of surrender or yielding or getting out of the way. So whatever is happening, whatever alchemical process is taking place,
mm.
can do what it's meant to do without me getting overly involved or getting in the way of it.
Yes. So exquisite. It's fellow Tory, and I know what it is to will our way through anything, really. Where there's a will, there's a way, and we sure make it happen. And
Mm,
that can be so exhaustive at a certain juncture. And so the invitation for us really, and as you're sharing, I'm hearing the ultimate resolution. And actually, Elon Musk just shared something on X, and it was to the tune of the only thing that really matters at this stage is becoming enlightened. And I was like,
Mm.
yes, thank you. Hallelujah. Thank you
Wow.
for utilizing your voice to express that, because the actuality is the inner world shapes, molds, and orchestrates the outer. And it all merges into one kind of symphonic synchronicity that we're
Mm.
experiencing as our life. But we are the sole operant power. And so when internal enlightenment is embodied, this is the key. It's a relaxing into, it's a resting into
Mm.
the felt known recognition of all being one love, oneness, wholeness, the true nature of the self, who we all are beyond the illusion of form. We are one
Mhm.
united being in benevolence and goodwill. And that has to be really richly rooted and anchored and resonating harmoniously in the body so that we can move with it and walk with it. And then we have this experiential reality of our own enlightened essence and divinity reflecting. Now, the opportunity here is to really anchor this in the physical body. That's where all the play work is for us, where our whole reality resolves itself. And it's returning to that state, that space of our excellency over and over and over again until we become encoded with it. And then, of course, those vibrational frequencies, they organically overwrite and dissolve all the old patterning and programming from our youth, from our traumas, from our internal fragmentations and illusions. Ultimately, any aspect within us where we're perceiving anything other than the presence of pure source. And so that's a lot. If we look at what we have going on inside of ourselves and we look at where am I actually seeing something other than the presence of pure love, that's an illusion, that's a shadow aspect that has to be integrated into the light of love. And so it is this massive unearthing and excavation and really ultimately becoming aware of ourselves.
Mm.
And so that supreme self-recognition embodied, because when we're enlightened, there are no problems. And the
Right.
mind's not creating more problems to solve, which creates this infinite samsara loop that we find ourselves in of like fixing, healing, saving, solving, all of this. But what if we could rest into, as a possibility, the actuality of our God state that knows itself as whole, as healed, as complete, as perfect, as pure love. And we cultivate that. And this is why everything that I have designed in my work and in my legacy and what I bring forward in the world is rooted in the cultivation of this internally, because I realized after 10 solid years of looking, intentionally looking, where's the pain? Where's the sorrow? Where's the
Mm.
trauma? Where are
Mhm.
the patterns? And going so deep and into the murky, like unfathomable spaces that thankfully most human beings will never touch the edge of the sensations
Mm.
that I have
Mhm.
experienced in this life and that many of us have deep, profound spaces. And I recognized after doing that, it's like, this is an infinite well. Why
Yes.
am
Yes.
I still swimming
Yep.
upstream against like in a swamp, looking for the light at the end of the tunnel, knowing that there's freedom and just continuing to forge with every morsel of holy fire in my being to like, where is the liberation? So dedicated to freeing myself from the density. And then this awareness came in because I asked the question, and the awareness was, you can choose something new.
Right.
You are at choice.
Right.
You can cultivate
Mm.
something
Mhm.
new. And so
Mhm.
I built this entire curriculum around cultivating our true nature, because oftentimes we can feel in these transformations we can feel the mind's not in control, but our divine essence is in at choice. And we can feel out of control. We can feel like things are mysterious and unknown and like we don't know what's going on. But at a more expansionary and deep level of our being, we know exactly what's going on. Our
Mm,
certainty is in love. We're aware of who we are as the ultimate. Our soul, our divine spark and flame, this part of us knows this. And so in times like this, when there's just a mega melodrama playing out in all these spheres, and we have this opportunity to choose what we
mm,
devote to. Are we going to embody the divine storyline? Are we going to engender and fuel it? Or are we going to augment some of these things that are not quite fruitful and
mm,
constructive?
mm-hmm,
We have the choice. And now we're looking at leaders and beings like yourself and me and many of our glorious friends and community who have these tools to support people, who have this awareness to go, hey, there's a new way, and we've all been calling for it, and that's why these things are happening.
mm-hmm, mm. Yeah, beautifully put. So I wanna ask you, we just came into a new year, 2025, halfway to 2030, and the last 4 years have been quite a deep medicine journey. So completing entire 4 year cycle, entering into this new cycle, this new era, there's a lot that feels like it's opening up in a really profound way. And there's also, in the last couple weeks, it's also felt very, very heavy. And there's been a lot of challenge. There's been a lot of tragedy. There's been a lot of, um, yeah, just resistance in the field. And so I'm just curious, what are your, what either like what's your personal experience? And,
Oh,
and when I say the last few weeks, I'm talking about the last few weeks of January 2025.
yes.
And what's been your feeling? What's been your navigation? And also what's your perspective or awareness of what you feel like is happening, or what are we kind of getting prepared for?
Yeah. You know, this is a great question. My experience has been intense, empowering, raw, elucidating, warm, rich, cozy, grounded, creationary. It's been this multifaceted diamond of experience. And it's all so beautiful because in that, I returned to, again, with feeling the waves, I actually had a question come in from a beloved in my community recently that was like, how do we maintain our center, our ground, our core when it appears as though there's so much going on in the world and there can be an influence of the collective group field?
Hmm.
And this really, in this space of these weeks and a huge part of that is witnessing people that I love
Mm,
dearly going through profound transformation, people who were impacted by what is unfolding in LA. And I cannot find a morsel of conscious reasoning within me for it because these are
mm,
divinely
hmm,
embodied, loving,
yeah.
kind, generous,
Hmm.
service oriented, like inclusionary, loving beings. And I'm feeling, the waves of all of these things. And I just made a choice to pick up my own torch and go, as the source, as the divine, I'm actually not going to choose to allow the collective group field or anyone or anything outside of me to influence my timeless choice to be limitless love and gratitude in motion in every here and now. And that's a space to apply the will because it actually is required to a certain extent to
Mm,
really operate from a space of super consciousness in every here and now where it's not so surrendered that we feel like we're being swept into the
yeah,
currents of
yeah.
other influences and not so even just open and even, that we're not at choice. There's an adeptness and an alertness. There's an alert presence, an intensity of presence that's called for in this moment. How am I choosing to be super conscious in my energy, in my heart, in my embodiment, and where I'm directing the light of my awareness, which is ultimately going to unfold the story of my life? Am I
Mm,
telling the supreme novel and narrative of love in this moment?
mm,
And we all have this power. And so I feel like the wider invitation for all of us is to remember and know deeply who we are as our eternal
mm,
flame,
mm,
as the source, as pure love, as the divine, and to choose to be the source of that love in all moments, no matter what.
mm, mhm. Yeah. So it comes back to self-sovereignty
Yes.
and self-sourcing. And that's a great pivot too with all this. And that's exactly what it's felt like for me with everything that's happened in my personal life. A lot of changes, a lot of rapid adjustments of my mind orienting from one frame of reality or timeline into opening up to a brand new one. And
Yeah.
that not being fully set and also not allowing the mind to get too far into future tripping,
Yes.
into setting up false castles of a future as a coping mechanism for not being able to be fully in the present moment, in the mystery of the now. And so I think that that's the toggle, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we get to be very mindful of when the mind is superimposing a projection of a future and identifying with it when it doesn't really have anything to do with what's happening right now, with what is in presence right now. And I think that brings up an interesting point too around relationship dynamics, or I think that's the most pronounced and the most obvious to kind of break down.
Yeah.
But it could be with anything, but we tend to identify with external circumstances, situations, or relationships because it meets so much of our needs for
Mm.
safety and security and certainty and companionship and connection and love and all that. And so the trap is when we start to identify with the thing outside of us, and then it becomes even more problematic when we start to identify with the thing outside of us that isn't actually based on something fundamentally real, but it's an idea in the mind.
Ah,
But it looks like it's outside of us because it's a projection and it's superimposing on the person or on the relationship that we're seeking to clearly define based on our parameters, based on what we think we want or what we think we need or whatever the filter interface of a paradigm or program that we have been told is going to provide the safety and assurance and love and whatever that we don't feel within us because there's a sense of, like you said, there's the anxiety, there's the
ah,
insecurity, and there's
yeah.
the lack of feeling stable inside myself, ourself, at any given moment. So it's interesting to notice where the mind will start to identify or attach to in order to relieve the
Mm.
discomfort in the moment versus just being fully present and fully allowing the experience of whatever is being felt to fully be felt, but not even attach or identify with what's being felt, but just to literally experience the pure experience of it and letting it wave through,
Yeah.
instead of trying to hold on or grasp or avoid or disconnect.
Oh, yeah. All the fabulous tactics that we have to try to keep ourselves safe. And there's an innocence and a purity in that. And I just would love to celebrate your profundity. So for everyone listening, you just zero pointed in on like the core that leads to all these other things, right, that are arising in reality. You just wove the core thread that interconnects them all at the root, which is, so I tuned into this probably a couple years ago and I asked, what is what is our fear? Is it why are we afraid of
Mhm.
ourselves? Why are we afraid of each other who is ourself? Where does that, what is our greatest fear? And the most fascinating answer came through, and it was a fear of presence
Mhm.
because the mind attaches itself to time
Yes.
to create a false sense of security, stability, safety, certainty. And as you said, that can be in the form of idyllic projections of people, places, circumstances, relationships, dynamics, what we think we require to be safe and stable and self sourcing.
Mm,
The reality is, none of those things can and will ever satisfy and
mm,
fulfill that within us.
yep.
Ever. It
Mhm.
doesn't even matter if we have the most perfect relationship dynamics in all
Mm,
existence.
mhm.
That will not ever satisfy what is required of us, which is, am I choosing to be pure divine love in this moment in an interface with my own pure divine essence expressing through all beings in this moment? And do I trust myself to do that? Do I trust myself to operate in non dual, loving awareness in every here and now? Now, it's our biggest fear because we have to relinquish everything else except for that.
Mm,
However, the paradox and the beauty and the brilliance is that precisely that is all that's required to ensure all the other things.
mm, mhm.
And so we're going at it backwards. We're looking at it as how does my mind, my analysis, my logic, my projections, my fantasies, how does all of this create a sense of safety and stability and security? Well, only knowing and being our true self can do that. And so we're self-sourcing the love, but we're also being the love. And we're certain in our own capacity to show up in this way. And our certainty in ourselves to be who and what we truly are is what, again, it all of those idyllic fairy
Mm,
tales and love novels that we have going on in our mind, that's when they actually play
mm,
out
mm, mhm.
when we're operating from that core. And so it's very paradoxical as much
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
this like is.
So th this actually brings up um, an interesting thought exercise around the observation that I've had so many experiences of receiving like what felt like a very clear channeled vision, message, direction, um, template for what felt like an inevitable or logical future, whether that be in a business situation, that be in, many relationship situations and the potential and trajectory of those things. Myself, like in just like my highest, most optimal state. And I've noticed that nothing ever seems to turn out exactly the way that I thought it would, or the sandcastles that I've built in my own consciousness, and also for pretty much everyone else that around me that I know that are very, very skilled at manifesting and creating. But it appears to me that a lot of these, and I don't know, maybe there's some missing mechanics or something, but it doesn't appear to me as so cookie cutter that you just manifest what you think, or even you're just manifesting what you think and you apply emotion to it, and that's a formulaic pattern for how to manifest your quote unquote desires.
Mhm.
It appears to me, as much as I've desired things consistently, I've also experienced an immense amount of things I don't desire that I wasn't thinking about consciously, at least, that just seem to be happening. You know,
Yep.
so like I mean, relationships are a great example of this, of just like how the full spectrum of dynamics that can happen, but just life as a whole. It's like there's so many contrasting experiences that happen in life that don't appear to have a rhyme or reason or a causal factor in terms of my thought process or what I'm thinking. So in a roundabout way, I'm wanting to just kind of get your take on this whole thing around, what we create in our mind, the visions, the architecture, the templating, whatever, the sandcastles that we build in our mind, and what is the disconnect in terms of how life actually operates.
I love that you're going here so much. Just had this discussion with beloved. It doesn't often ever, right? There might be some core aspects of the vision that unfold or micro moments of reflections that are actually quite precising feedback. There's nobody that I know who what they thought that they wanted or thought that they were defining, or the lists or the visions or the ideas that they had architected in their own mind have ever come to pass in the
Hmm.
precising way that they thought that it would. And the reason for that is because reality isn't at all concerned with what we want or what
So,
we think
okay,
that we
yeah, right, right.
and we somehow have created this kind of
Fascinating.
dangling of the carrot
Mm,
that's like, here's
mm.
how to have everything that you want. Or some part of us is in the disillusionment that we're actually going to, when we just say that we want this thing or wish to have it, then it's what's going to appear in our
Yeah,
lives.
it's like entitlement syndrome.
It's in it. There's also this kind of like aura of just like total illusion. It's like
Right.
what kind of and so there's some part of the mind that believes that because it keeps going after it again and again and again and again, and
Totally.
it's
Yeah.
disillusioned again and again and again and again. And there's a reason for that. And it's not because reality's not behaving or people aren't behaving in the way that you want them to. It's because the fundamental shift is here. The change, the embodiment is here.
Yeah.
Life gives
Mm,
us precisely down to the
mm,
nanosecond who we are being, period.
mm,
We,
mm-hmm.
and this is why, again, embodied enlightenment is the resolution to everything, because what do we all desire at our core? We all desire to experience the delicacies, peak states, are the most pure divine love, the most Epicurean, glorious life, love novel and adventure
Mm,
unfolding, intimacy, communion, oneness,
mm.
super prosperity. Everything that we desire is in alignment with our ultimate nature. And so when we make the focus, not I'm going to manifest what I think that I
Yeah.
want, I'm going to be the most well-rounded, full-bodied,
Mm,
full-blooded embodiment of my divine nature, then I get to experience my divine nature
yeah.
expressing and reflecting everywhere. So when the sandcastle crumbles, what it's really showing us is where we have an opportunity to deepen our embodiment. And that's a lot to sit with. I've had a lot of sandcastles crumble in my life. I've been disillusioned. It's required so much of my being to come home to this truth and this core and to recognize the soul of what this is all really about for each
Mm,
of us. And when we actually go home to the core and we make that the focus, and we release the sandcastles in the sky, but we make the devotion,
mm.
I'm going to be the
Yeah.
greatest embodied expression of love that I can
Mm,
be in this moment. I'm going to convene with the heart of divinity, with the light of divinity in my own self, in another, in all moments. When that is the devotion, everything else unfolds, and this is my direct experience, in ways that absolutely exceed in every way anything that we could have possibly
totally.
constructed.
Yes. And I
with
think
our
that what
mind.
you just said is actually what we want.
Yes.
We want life to exceed our expectations because on some level we know that, our expectations are far below what's possible. It's the limitations of our mind, of our imagination, of our prior life experiences, of the traumas that skew our or distort our cognitive perception of reality. On some level, we're aware of our tracking device is not optimal. It's not what it can be.
Right.
And so I think it's almost like what's the image that's coming up to me is like, in the world of
Mhm.
like isms, like, like atheism as an example, it's a very interesting one too, because I don't actually believe that any self-proclaimed atheist at their core is actually an atheist in the defined sense that, I don't actually believe in God or a God because atheism itself is a form of theology. It is a form of a religion. So therefore,
Yeah.
there is a God that is being worshipped, even if it isn't a clearly defined intelligence. There is an ideology. There is an egregore. There is a thought. There is something that's being imbued that is creating a living entity. Um, and I sense that within that model if there was an experience that exceeded the expectations of that belief system, i.e., an encounter with God or an encounter with Jesus or an encounter with a divine experience, a spirit, like a revelatory experience that opened that person up, then
Mhm.
all of a sudden there would be an experience of relief and of reprieve and of like gratitude of like I'm so actually grateful that my assumptions were proven wrong.
Yes, yes,
And I think
yes.
on some level all of us deep down want that because we know that our assumptions about life can't be all there is because if that's true then God help us.
Profoundly, profoundly limiting. And I don't frequently utilize this word, but actually self-sabotaging
Yeah.
in the way that those limited constructs, even the sandcastles that we've built in their limitations, we keep ourselves because of the expectations that we have placed upon others in the world to satisfy something that only we can satisfy within ourselves through
Mm,
self with a capital S fulfillment.
mm,
We disappoint our own selves again and again and again and again.
mm, mm,
And
hmm.
there's these then inbuilt
That's right. That's
limitations.
it.
And so how do we actually resolve that at its core? It's not to continue to keep building sandcastles and keep letting ourselves down. It's the
Mm,
resolution is
yeah.
we can't let ourselves down when we're being the fullness of who we are. It's the greatest fulfillment. And so it's just, it seems like such a mystical, spiritual, devotional space that, and it is, but the mind wants it to be more complex than this. And in some cases, it wants it to be more easy than
Mm-hmm.
this because of
Sure.
the intensity of presence that's required. The divine union, self to self, love to love, light to light in every single moment,
Mm,
whatever we're communing with,
mm,
divine union
mm-hmm,
unfolds the ultimate symphony, synchronicity, unison, and miracle of our lives
mm,
that is far beyond our human mind's capacity to
mm,
comprehend the glory, the majesty, and the profound gifts of it. And you're absolutely right. This is what we each wish to be experiencing. And so, what we have to ask ourselves is how devoted am I to being
mm,
present
mm.
to that union in every here and now? Because that resolves everything
Yeah.
else.
It
And
literally it resolves everything else because everything else is a byproduct of the mind. So
of our
all of
being.
our so
Oh,
like
but
all of our
yeah,
pro well, I
yeah,
mean, like, for you mentioned earlier like the problems of the mind. And it's
yes.
like, but when you're in pure presence, even if you're problem solving, you're in the action and the engagement with life. You're not on the sidelines ruminating or worrying about something that you're not actively involved with.
Right,
So
right.
that, and I think that's kind of the distinction or the perspective that I think is really important for all of us to continue to recalibrate to the present moment, yes, and like just being present, but then it's like, okay, what do I need to be present for? What are
Mm.
the things that I'm trailing off in, in worry, concern, fear, and doubt? What are the themes? What is that showing me? What is that teaching me? What are the things that I generally am worried about? And then obviously, if I stay in worry, I become overwhelmed by it and I feel crippled and paralyzed. So I'm not able to act or be present for the things that I'm worried that I'm not present for.
Yeah.
So, like, to me,
Uh-huh.
when I hear this, there's a level of practicality to this that is so clear and obvious. And the presence is a practice. It's an active meditation. And this is also why I tell people, have a meditation practice, not because of whatever you think meditation is for or what you need, or like, oh, I can't meditate because I get distracted. It's like, exactly, it's a training exercise. It's not about some lofty thing or you're gonna ascend or some craziness. Like, it's literally just so you can practice being present to whatever your somatic system is sensing and feeling, and having a breathing rhythm, and taking 5 to 10 minutes to practice being present for 5 to 10 minutes, and then building a building a capacity so that when now you're washing the dishes or you're engaged with your lover or you're in a challenging situation, now you have a little bit more training to be present so you can be effective, so you can execute, so you can resolve problems as they arise and they don't become dragons that you have to slay down the road.
Absolutely, because that's what it turns into, right? When we're preoccupied. So here's where the power is. The power is in the undivided, high powered heart, undivided attention,
Mm,
a romance with, an engagement with, a
mm,
unification with, that it's engaging, right? There's lifeblood in that. There's a dance, there's a movement, there's a beautiful, soulful, passionate intensity of
mm,
life. And what can tend to happen for us is many, many beings are walking through life just halfway on board,
right,
halfway
right.
online. Energy and attention is diverted in time, focused on people, places, circumstances, situations. And that is actually how we entropy and drain our power. It actually
Yes,
has
yes.
nothing to do with the person or the situation
Mm,
or the thing. It
mm-hmm,
has to do with our
mm-hmm,
own mastery
mm-hmm,
of timeless presence, which is where all of our aliveness, all of our power, all of our je ne sais quoi and creative brilliance is.
mm-hmm,
If and so those threads, those streams of distraction, diverted attention and awareness alerts us to, this is one where I'm placing my power outside of myself and where I still am operating from fear versus
mm-hmm,
love. And that can
mm-hmm,
take on many
mm-hmm,
forms and shapes and definitions, but it's really relevant to just be aware of, am I engaged with the dance of love in this moment, or am I operating in fear? That's what all those constructs are a product of.
mm-hmm,
And so we can then return to, yeah, active practices of how am I going to make love to the moment, and make it
mm-hmm.
juicy and fun and novel, not this kind of like I mean, it can be this if this is your flavor, but not just this kind of like empty Buddhist monk kind of
Yeah.
thing where we're
Yeah.
just we're there and we're present, but we're kind of just doing one of the
But
like
we're detached and we're not really like we're kind of passive and this whole thing's an illusion anyway, so I'm not really gonna fully participate in it.
right. Like I'm seeing like oh, like merge with it,
Full
meld with it, have
immersion. Like
yes.
full immersion with life.
Yes, that's where the power, that's where the nectar, that's where the goodness
Mm,
and like
that's powerful.
we root, we ground, it's yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's for all of the what I would consider like the warm radiance and the beauty of the human experience. Because think about any time you've sat with a beloved or a client or someone who you
Mm-hmm.
love deeply, the
Mm-hmm.
most profound moments is when like the universe
Yeah.
disappears
Totally.
and you're just in the eternity of one another's eyes and souls and being, and
Mm,
there's a potency of transformation, there's an alchemy of love, and it's this kind of mystical,
yeah.
timeless. This
Yeah.
is where all the nectar is.
Yeah. 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 It's the ecstasis. It's the peak state of liberation. And what's the liberation? You're liberated from the constraints of the monkey mind.
Yep,
And
all
it's
is
not and
happening
right
here.
and that's where you really start to discover that so much of our stresses and our diseases and our our psycho-emotional like maladies and aberrations are actually coming from an aberration of consciousness, which is that the consciousness or the force that lives inside of us or the force that courses through us, when you try to when you repress and suppress that energy, and let's just take it to a basic example, when you suppress and repress your emotions. Right,
Mhm.
that's something we all understand. That's very grounded and obvious. Like when we're repressing our emotions and we're overemphasizing our mental processing, i.e., I'm overthinking about something and I'm having a dialogue in my head that's literally in my head, and I'm expecting someone or life to read my mind or to anticipate my needs or whatever whatever the thought process is, but it's not being communicated, it's not being expressed, it's all just in my head, and I'm expecting reality to just conform uh or whatever. Like I'm in my head and I'm
Yep.
living in my head, and so that's actually a symptom that I have suppressed emotions, that I have suppressed and bottled
Mhm.
up energy in my body, and I don't feel safe. And my way to feel safe or to feel certain is to create a dialogue in my head that reinforces a bias that an
Mhm.
inauthentic version of me
Yes.
is holding. Because
Ah,
to your point, when the authentic version is fully present, there is no dialogue. It just is.
yeah. And that's like the untrue self grasping for safety because it's searching for the construct, the self-fulfilling, what this becomes, it all becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, the one that feels most safe and comforting or empowering or enlivening. And it's looking to utilize those constructs to create that sense of safety inside. But it's again, it's in the power of being in the sensuousness of the body fully here and now. So even our meditative
Mhm.
practice becomes a lovemaking ceremony. And the state of awareness shifts from, well, what do I want? What is solely my intent? But who am I choosing to be? I am. And
Mhm.
cultivating a depth of resonance with what we think that we want from the world is really us calling for our own mastery.
Yeah,
I actually
that's
want to
exactly.
I want to
Exactly.
experience myself as this. You can't possibly give me something that I'm not actively being.
Mm, mm. So it's not about manifesting things, it's about manifesting ourself.
Yes, that's it. That's the elegance, and we're always manifesting who we are being,
Yep.
always.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so the greatest, the epitome of that is our divine self, source self, love self, whatever we uniquely define that as. It's the epitome of our ultimate reality made manifest. And so it's coming home to the core of that and doing the embodiment practices of who am I
Mm,
as that energy, and
mm,
reminding ourselves and feeling ourselves as it, and like really getting into the sensuous essence of the body. And this is where art and music and poetry and all of these things. And when we recognize that we're creating a construct for safety, right? If I can identify what I want and I
mm,
can go, okay, well,
mm,
that's accessible here and it's not accessible here. So I'm going to go this way. But oh, wow, the sand castle is going to crumble too when I go this way. And so I'm just going to keep repeating this, utilizing the mirror of my creation to complete myself,
mm,
utilizing people, circumstances, situations, constructs to find a sense of safety and completion, attempting to create oneself or to complete oneself through their creation rather than actively being the creation
mm,
of
mm.
oneself
Yeah.
that does complete the creation. And so it just all comes back home to the embodied realization of who we are. We are the manifestation.
Mm,
And
mm,
it's just a
mm-hmm.
complete, and so in that sense, there's actually not even anything to manifest. It's coming into the recognition of the isness and the actuality of our authentic self that already is, that's permanent, eternal, everlasting,
Wow.
and landing in that space. So it's a merging, it's a coherence, it's a synergy that takes place
Mm,
within
mm-hmm.
us. And the
Mm-hmm.
more that we contemplate and reflect on and remind ourselves, so the inner novel isn't, I want this and I want that. It's
Yeah.
like a child, right? Like,
Yeah.
bless
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
holy
Yeah.
hearts.
Totally.
It's like, well, for me to feel this way, I have to have this thing. It's like, actually, I'm going to go in and I'm going to cultivate the frequencies of being in this
Mm,
thing. It's
mm-hmm.
just from I want to I am. I
Yeah.
am, I be this, I am this, and I celebrate this. And the more
Mm-hmm.
we feel that, the more that reverberation pulses into the field and actually transforms everything through the unified field of our being, our life circumstances, our
Yeah. Yeah.
relationships, our
Yeah.
prosperity. Like people actually shift how they start showing up to us.
Completely. And I think there's an important caveat, at least for me in this, is that although things I have seen things happen instantaneously, this is not like a magic trick. This is not a parlor trick that again, it's not a rearranging of the mind because a lot of times like the mind will get a hold of this truth and try to rearrange its dialogue to match the principle and then like oh well, why
Yeah.
didn't anything change because exactly because it's still because you still haven't taken the journey from disengaging the mind, which is an entire process, and following all the way down into the heart, and then finding a resting place into the heart, into the autonomic nervous system, which is it's a journey, it's a process, you have to literally go through the operating system, and it's a lifelong quest. It's a this is not just like a 30-day program or something to get A, B, C, and D. It's so the layers of programs that can come up over time, even though you think you got it, and then you'll still see where you'll still like you'll unbeknownst to yourself be grasping for some external result or thing, and then the sandcastle falls apart, and you're like, wait, what? And and and
Return
then
to
and then
home.
and then
Return.
so it's like there is a yeah, there's a grace with this.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a self-love and self-care practice where you're literally just learning how to love yourself and how to self-talk and self-guide and and you just take care of yourself through the process of relearning how to walk or how to see and feel through the lens of the heart and the somatic body versus how we're trained to operate through the mind.
Yeah. I mean, the mind goes in loops, right? I do this, and when I
Hmm.
recognize that I'm doing this, it's like I mother myself, and this is how we become extraordinary stewards of life and of one another, is through giving this to ourselves. I go through, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go chill out for a minute. And then I just like lead myself back into my heart and I breathe into my heart. I do everything in my power to focalize my awareness back into the heart. And so for anyone who's sharing this beautiful journey with us in this moment, if you're not aware of Heart Math
Hmm.
Institute, I would highly recommend reading their research papers. The electromagnetic field of the heart, which contains its own brain, is 50,000 times more powerful than the electric thoughts in our mind. So we just drive ourselves insane,
Hmm.
literally, and we
Hmm.
loop. So we loop the insanity,
Yeah.
but the recognition is that it's all a self-imposed, self-fulfilling prophecy. We're doing it to ourselves. It's not the thing that we're thinking about, or the circumstance, or the life situation, or the perception of incompletion, or not enoughness, or lack. It's this really, really seeking its home here, because
Mm,
this is
mm,
its own intelligence. It is its own mind.
mm,
It is its pure perception, pure vision, pure intelligence. When we come back into this space, this calms down, right? And it's
yeah.
like, and then when we're in this
Yeah.
space, it's like, okay, honey, I love you so much. I extend you my grace. I
Mm,
forgive you. It's all sacred and holy. It's
mm,
okay. I know that you were scared
yeah.
and trying to find safety. And so we come back into the power. This is about living from the power of the heart, the integrity, the solidarity of the heart,
Mm,
and
mm,
trusting ourselves to be in that depth of royal divinity where the crown resides in the heart, and to love all life, and to include all life, and to nourish ourselves and one another precisely in the way that the divine does us, to actually be the full embodiment
mm,
of
mm,
that energy on earth. And that is our heaven on
yeah.
earth. And so having
Mm,
tremendous grace and compassion with ourselves, because we all have moments where we spin out,
yep.
you know?
Absolutely.
So it's having the
Absolutely.
tools and the technologies and the practices that work uniquely for us to continuously guide ourselves back home to
Mm,
the
beautiful. And I'd say with the last piece of awareness with what you're bringing home and how we started this conversation, the layers and the beliefs and whatever, just let's just call it the layers that are falling away or being dismantled or deconstructed. These are all the things that need to be transformed and transmuted in order for one to actually fully embody their authenticity and their true self, and which is really what you're talking about, is heart-led, heart-centered, the heartbeat that beats life, that beats you, that beats the drum to your life purpose, to your North Star. The clarity of your vision all coming from that same source, and that coherent line of light is just clouded. And so all those distortion patterns, or let's just call it again, like layers, blocks, barriers to that, get to be deconstructed. So when you're going through a really tough experience, or you're experiencing contrast or resistance, or um, an experience that feels really, really challenging, just know that what is coming up is an opportunity to let that go. But it has to be
Mhm.
fully experienced. It has to be, because that's how we process it out through the somatic body. It's all in the body. So it has to be processed out through the body. But if we hold and lock and try to control, we actually do more harm to ourselves in the time of the trigger, in the moment of the trauma response. We actually cripple something. We halt a process, and it creates a disconnect in the energy pathways of the system, and it creates a confusion. so that we lose sight or we lose track of how to get back to ourself.
Yeah, absolutely right. That's exactly it creates. Well, it's interesting because confusion could be like an inner conflict, but it's also the etymology is con with fusion. We're actually unveiling pure awareness
Mm,
and all the, we'll just say unconscious dissonant aspects, however they're uniquely expressing, all of that is what's being released, and it's being released through the somatic body. And so that we can fuse with a unified luminous awareness and
mm,
actually feel the tonal resonance of that truth in our body. And so it's, there came a space in my journey where one of my primary practices, and I still navigate this too, and whenever I'm navigating anything, I can just offer. I'm like pressing love into my body. I'm like, I love you. I got you. Life loves you. I'm like getting into the body with the richness of that
yeah,
so
yeah.
that I'm not feeling the kind of instabilities of
Mm,
the catalyst and the trigger itself. So there's that. But then now it's also there's this practice of I release with love and grace, I release myself to myself at the altar of my divinity. And then
mm,
I just open into the oneness. However, it's been a catalyst for me for much, and you've saved my life, literally.
mm,
And it's required me many intense initiatory life experiences within my own consciousness, right? Because all we're all doing is clarifying our own
mhm,
consciousness into pure awareness and coming home to the truth of who we are as one almighty, benevolent, loving being. And then it's stabilizing that.
mhm,
So
mhm.
it's
Yeah.
required many years of devotion, like Olympian athlete devotion, because the pulse for freedom was so great,
Yeah. Yeah.
because the suffering was so strong.
Yeah.
And so, but now it's a space where that's a part of my recognition every morning as I give myself to myself and I'm in full celebration
Mm,
of love's presence
mm,
everywhere. And that's
mhm.
so that's where I drive my energy is solely into gratitude for love's presence operating everywhere. And that keeps me energized, keeps me vital and fueled
Yeah.
and moving with intent purpose in every moment.
Mm, mm, mhm. Yeah. Incredible. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love you. I'm so grateful for like the juiciness and the depth and the expanse
Mm,
and the
mm,
groundedness of our conversations. I
yeah.
just like the intricacies and the nuance. I greatly appreciate it.
Mm, yeah. So it's definitely it's not many people that I can ping pong with like that and all over the place, but it's really not all over the place. There's a very synchronized zero point of focus of like where this is going and what we're tracking.
Yes.
And it's beautiful to do it in this way and bring a lot of other people along for the journey.
Yeah,
Hmm.
all of our loves. We love
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Where can people learn more about you if they want to connect with you or follow what you're doing?
Yeah. So solararose.com is my website. You can gain access to a whole gala of liquid gold truth transmissions, explore my services, and Instagram at Solara Rose. Those are the two best places
Hmm.
to connect.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, Solara. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And
Mhm.
thank you, everyone, for taking this journey with us. And we will see you on the next episode. Aloha.